In the spring of 1992, over 10,000 take to the street in Los Angeles and riot. Thousands of buildings are significantly damaged. Many burned to the ground.
We saw everything, and this fire that's burning, well, these fires, we've got, how many buildings have we got burning there?
One, two, three, one's already gone.
Koreatown takes the brunt of the rampage, and nearly 2,000 businesses are destroyed. Many of these businesses soon learn they're also victims of mass insurance fraud. Victims of a conspiracy committed by a husband and wife selling worthless insurance policies through a complex network of offshore companies. It will nearly shut down the surplus lines market in California.
A number of Koreatown businesses were torched, and many of those businesses were insured through the surplus line market into a series of insurers that were based largely in the Turks and Caicos and had minimal, if any, true assets.
And that's when the whole thing fell apart, and that's when we realized, the regulators realized, that we had this marketplace that was unregulated and had just victimized thousands of Californians to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. And now we had a real problem.
State regulators intend to shut down the surplus lines insurance market in California. The industry will rely on one of its own to lead a coalition and fight for its survival. You could say that Jerry Sullivan has insurance in his blood. He was born in Olympia, Washington in 1937 to a family of insurance giants. His father, John, served as an insurance regulator and then established a successful reinsurance company. And his great-uncle Bill served as the Washington State Insurance Commissioner for over 3 decades. Jerry jokes that while all the other kids were reading Mother Goose, he was reading insurance regulations. Growing up, Jerry was an avid outdoorsman, heavily involved in scouting and eventually earning the rank of Eagle Scout. He went on to the University of Washington to study finance, but he had his sights set a little higher.
As I came out of undergraduate at the University of Washington, and I didn't have a lot of imagination, but I majored in finance and minored in insurance. But I've been told many times I really majored in ROTC, and I ended up graduating actually with a regular commission, ended up going into flight training, and my whole experience in the military developed from there. Like most guys, I wanted to fly fighters, but there were almost no fighter assignments. And the 2 fighter assignments were there, went bang, bang. I think I was number 4 in class. And there were several transport slots and so forth, but a lot of B-52 slots. I decided that was going to be my cup of tea. I flew what we called heavy iron, traveled all over the world. It was a fabulous career, all kinds of places. And as we often called it in the trade, hours and hours of sheer boredom punctuated by moments of sheer terror. We had a series of missions called Chrome Dome. I can talk about them now, couldn't talk about them for the longest time, but Chrome Dome missions were major patrol missions done by the B-52s. And we had 2 routes. One was the southern route, which was out over the Mediterranean. We would take off out of Wright-Patterson. We would pick up a tanker shortly after takeoff, top off our fuel, and then head east. And ultimately, we would coast in Portugal, pick up another tanker out of Torreón, Spain, fly out over the Mediterranean. By then, we would go to a very high altitude, cut down most all except the 2 outboard engines, and just coast home because we no longer had enough fuel. We could accomplish what we were doing. But all those missions, we were fully loaded, and we were what we termed an executable sortie, which meant if the president had to go to war, we had our targets, we knew where we would go, we knew what we would do. We had about a dozen aircraft airborne 24/7 all the time. The only exception to that was in the Cuban Missile Crisis. And in the Cuban Missile Crisis, we went into full airborne alert, where we had about over 180 aircraft airborne 24/7. Our second route on that was a northern route where we would fly up beyond the North Pole. And both of those routes, the southern route was about a 25-hour mission, and the northern route was about a 30-hour mission. And I always chuckle with these people who complain about a 4 or 5 hour flight.
Jerry flew B-52s for 5 years, achieving the rank of captain. He then went on to earn an MBA from the Wharton School of Finance and Commerce before trying his hand at politics.
You're running for statewide office. It is an amazing experience. I ran for commissioner in, I think it was the '68 election, and successfully lost. They actually put up a guy by the name of Jerry Sullivan to also run, which we had to deal with. You begin to learn how much fun politics really is. It was very disappointing to lose, but in the long run, I think it probably worked out, from my standpoint, a whole lot better than I could have expected.
In 1980, Jerry started the Sullivan Group and successfully built a prominent insurance company based in Los Angeles.
We've been lucky enough to be able to hit above our weight very frequently, and we've just got a fantastic team, which is what makes it work.
Working for Jerry is probably the most enriching 15 years that I've had. We're a team.
Yeah, Jerry was one of those people who was extremely knowledgeable, extremely accessible, and if you had questions or wanted to find out what was going on within the company, you could go and ask him. You could talk to the man.
He's always said, this business is about the people. And if you're not talking to the people, if you're not communicating directly with the people, then you're not really doing this business.
Well, looking at Jerry, you wouldn't realize that he was an early adopter to email, but he has certainly embraced it as a communication tool.
I talk to Jerry maybe every couple of months. I hear from Jerry on email every week.
Wherever Jerry is, one thing that I've always observed is he has a laptop nearby. And I used to wonder whether or not he was watching movies or what he was doing, but bottom line, he was always returning emails.
Some of which I've read, some of which I've said, oh, there's Jerry again.
Jerry will remember the content of an email that he sent to you 8 months ago.
But most of them have been helpful and have been things that I've been able to read and glean important information from.
Jerry is always on. He's never off.
His work ethic is second to none.
His energy seemingly is unending.
How he finds the time to do it all is a good question to ask. I don't know, but he does. Maybe he's got 36 hours in his days and the rest of us have got 24.
We all want to hit that level of excellence that Jerry holds everybody and himself to.
And I do appreciate being on his email list.
I mean, communications is the heart of the brokerage business.
Jerry has a deep-rooted conviction to giving back. Among his many causes, he is a supporter of Verbum Day High School in Los Angeles' Watts neighborhood. He is on the Council for Disabled Veterans and is a notable benefactor to the cancer treatment and research facility, City of Hope.
He's been involved with the City of Hope for a long time. He's extremely well respected there. He does an enormous amount of volunteer work.
He's raised tens of millions of dollars for this organization through his leadership of the national insurance industry. In his role as a Spirit of Life honoree in 1997 and in the years that followed, his advocacy, he's brought dozens of influential volunteers to support City of Hope.
A number of years ago, I got a very good friend of mine, Tony Markell, to become our honoree. And part of the routine that we go through every year with our honoree is we hold a tour out at the campus in Duarte. But Tony was so taken with how supportive and helpful and wonderful the people at City of Hope were. He took on a massive fundraising project for City of Hope, raised $1 billion.
You know, it's not just Jerry who's part of the City of Hope family, it's Wendy as well. She's at the Spirit of Life events when he comes. She knows everybody. She also has been a connector for us.
Actually, I met Wendy in London after I ended up back here in LA and she ends up back in Toronto. And in any event, the relationship went on, and after about 6 months, I decided I couldn't afford the phone bills. So I went to Toronto and asked her to marry me. And
Wendy is Jerry's rock. and the place that Jerry finds that stability to do everything that he does.
That's really, I think, the secret to Jerry's success, is having that stabilizing force behind him, someone who loves him and cares for him and keeps him in line, quite frankly. I think he would agree with that.
She's there, make sure things work, is quite prepared to tell me when I don't know what the devil I'm doing, which is not infrequent. She's been an enormously positive impact on my whole life.
Jerry and Wendy share a passion for adventure. They have traveled the world extensively, and Jerry has captured much of its beauty with his award-winning photography.
On these trips, I just take all kinds of pictures of one sort or another, and it is great fun. And going back and after the trip, being able to remember this thing and that thing and the other thing.
This picture is really kind of special. This is one I took a number of years ago in the Forbidden City in Beijing. And the thing that's interesting about it is that this book is a book that was written by Jeffrey Kent. And I've done a lot of work with Abercrombie and Kent. And this is about his life story. He's an interesting guy, to say the least. But he wanted the permission to use that picture because that was one I had sent in for an Abercrombie and Kent photo contest.
Wendy and Jerry are both accomplished anglers who have mastered the difficult art of fly fishing.
Jerry's expertise in fishing is legendary.
Being in the same boat with Jerry can be a humbling experience, as he's pulling in trout after trout and I'm pulling in fly after fly.
Well, fishing is a great experience in many ways. You go to wonderful places. You're usually with great people, great company. It's just a lot of fun and a very enjoyable thing and a great camaraderie process.
But much of it's business. You have to remember, Jerry brings a complete slideshow to every trip.
Driving to the airport, fly fishing, whatever it happens to be, there's usually a deck of slides somewhere nearby that he's going to run you through.
There is an update on legal issues. There's an update on California-specific issues.
Everything is about graphs and trending and markets and data, a lot of data analytics.
And so the pictures are fantastic of all the fishing, but at the root of it is all insurance.
In the wake of the LA riots, the surplus lines industry in California had a real problem.
This scoundrel, Alan Teal, set up these bogus small business products and mass market them in areas like Los Angeles. And it worked until there were massive claims.
A husband and wife team had sold thousands of bogus insurance policies to small businesses through a network of companies based largely in the Caribbean.
So when the LA riots came and the Koreatown was burned, there was no money collected.
Then it became terribly evident that there were a lot of bogus companies and actually several brokers in this state and in other states that were aiding and abetting these people to write business where, frankly, they were not capable of paying the claims.
So one of the things that happened was our newly elected insurance commissioner, John Garamendi, was very upset about all of the things that were going on.
To the point where at a meeting of NAPSLO, where Garamendi was a guest speaker, at which time he informed the industry that it was his intent to shut the industry down.
And needed to do away with the Surplus Lines Association because clearly we weren't doing the job.
Jerry Sullivan stepped up to the plate and started rounding up a number of people to form a coalition to actually modify the laws in California in the surplus line markets.
We went through line by line of legislation, of proposed legislation.
To make them more viable and make them more protective of the consumers of California.
In so many things that we deal with is if you can figure out what it is you're really trying to accomplish, which is the object of the exercise, it makes it so much easier in trying to get to that end result.
The coalition led by Jerry Sullivan ultimately saved the surplus lines insurance market in California. They established relationships with regulators and legislators to help them better understand the necessity for surplus lines insurance and its critical role in the California economy. They successfully negotiated legislation which codified the Surplus Line Association of California's role as a quasi-regulatory entity, providing education, compliance, and oversight. In 2018, it is estimated that $7 billion of surplus lines premium will be written in the state. The market is healthy, fair, and competitive, and in large part due to the efforts of Jerry Sullivan.